Helena tightened her scarf around her neck, shielding herself from the icy wind that swept through the deserted streets of Villa de las Almas. Once vibrant with festivals and fairs celebrating its rich local traditions, the village now felt like a ghost of its former self. Wooden houses displayed weathered facades, and the main square stood abandoned, with broken benches and gardens overrun by weeds. Helena hurried toward the municipal library, the only place that still preserved a fragment of the village's memory. At 28 years old, Helena bore the weight of a responsibility she had never chosen. Her father, José Amaral, had been a renowned historian in the region, celebrated for his research on the cultural treasures of the village. However, in the final years of his life, José had become the target of ridicule. He claimed to have found clues about a legendary artifact that could transform the fate of Villa de las Almas, but he had never been able to prove his theories. When he passed away 5 years earlier, he left Helena with a mix of pride and shame for the legacy he had tried to defend. Now, Helena split her time between teaching history at the small local school and cataloging the ancient books in the library. The work, though solitary, was a comfort. Among the yellowed pages and scribbled margins, she found echoes of a more promising past, a time when people still believed in the value of preserving their roots. That morning, while organizing a new shipment of volumes from an anonymous donation, something caught her attention. One of the books, an old and battered edition of Chronicles of Gold and Souls, exuded a peculiar scent of mold mixed with something sweet, almost like honey. Helena opened the book carefully, running her fingers over its brittle pages. That was when she noticed that one of them was stuck together. Gently, she used the tip of a blade to separate the pages. Inside, she found a map, but it wasn't just any map. The lines were ancient, drawn with faded ink, but still legible. Notes filled the margins, some in Latin, others in a handwriting that felt hauntingly familiar. Helena's heart raced. It was her father's handwriting. Recovery is redemption, one of the phrases read. Helena repeated the words under her breath, trying to decipher their meaning. The map seemed to point to a mountainous region near the village, an area she knew well from the legends her grandmother used to tell. According to the old stories, a lost treasure rested there, symbolizing the unity of the village's earliest inhabitants. Helena froze for a moment, overwhelmed. A mixture of excitement and fear surged through her. Why would her father hide such a map? And why had he never mentioned it to her? Conflicting thoughts raced through her mind, but one thing was clear. This map could be the key to saving Villa de las Almas. In recent years, the village mayor, Antonio Magalhães, had been pressuring residents to sell their land to an agricultural corporation. He argued that it was the only way to lift the region out of poverty. Many had been swayed by the generous offers, but Helena knew this would mean the definitive end of the village's cultural identity. The mayor and his ally, Carlos Barreto, a businessman of dubious morals, saw Helena as a thorn in their side. Although she lacked significant influence, her classes and lectures on the importance of preserving local history inspired some residents to resist. Finding that map felt like a sign, she thought. Perhaps her father had been right all along. But what if she was wrong? What if the map led to nothing? Helena couldn't bear the thought of disappointing the village further. Still, something in her heart told her she had to try. That night, Helena returned home with the map tucked securely in a folder. Her house was simple, a wooden cabin with walls lined with books and old maps. Beside the fireplace, a portrait of her father seemed to watch her, as if expecting something. Helena sat at the table, spread the map out, and began studying it meticulously. Her father's annotations were fragmented, but suggested the existence of a starting point at a trail beginning near the old chapel of São Gabriel, now in ruins. Helena remembered visiting the place with her father many years ago. It was a mystical site, surrounded by legends of miracles and apparitions. As she analyzed the map, an unsettling thought struck her. The mayor and Carlos mustn't find out about this. If the artifact was real and held any value, they would surely try to stop her. Helena knew she had to proceed with caution. The following morning, Helena decided to act. She visited Donna Maria, one of the oldest residents of the village, and a keeper of many local secrets. The elderly woman lived in a house filled with dried herbs hanging from the ceiling and shelves crammed with relics. When Helena showed her the map, Donna Maria's eyes widened with astonishment. "I knew Jose wasn't crazy," the old woman said, her voice trembling. "He always said the future of this village was buried in the past." Donna Maria confirmed that the region marked on the map was the same one mentioned in old folk songs. However, she warned Helena about the dangers. Those who sought the treasure never returned. They say the mountains guard secrets that don't wish to be uncovered. Helena felt a chill, but she was resolute. That night, as the wind howled outside, she packed her belongings. She knew she was about to embark on a journey that would change her life forever. Dawn broke gently over Villa de las Almas, painting the rooftops in golden and pink hues. Helena stood in the village's quiet square, a backpack filled with provisions slung over her shoulders, and the map carefully tucked into a leather case. Though she hadn't told anyone about her plan, determination shone in her eyes. She had spent most of the previous night marking possible routes on the map and preparing herself for the challenges ahead. The path to the old chapel of São Gabriel was a mix of compacted dirt and loose stones, bordered by a dense forest that whispered with the wind. Helena hadn't visited the place since she was a child, but the stories her grandmother told about the mysteries of the region still echoed in her mind. According to the legends, the chapel was the starting point for a secret long guarded by the village's ancestors. As she walked, Helena couldn't help but feel a swirl of emotions. Fear of the unknown loomed over her, but so did a flicker of hope that grew stronger with each step. Her father had devoted his life to unraveling the mysteries of Villa de las Almas, and now she was walking the same path. After nearly an hour of hiking, Helena reached a clearing where the remnants of the chapel stood like a forgotten monument. The stone walls were cloaked in moss, and the roof had long since collapsed, allowing shafts of light to filter into the interior. Helena approached cautiously, feeling as though the place pulsed with ancient energy. At the center of the chapel lay a crumbled altar. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the map from its case and spread it out over one of the stones. According to her father's notes, she needed to find a symbol carved into the rocks. With her heart pounding, she began inspecting every corner of the ruins. Finally, at the base of the altar, she discovered a star-shaped engraving surrounded by Latin inscriptions. The words were difficult to decipher, but one phrase stood out. "The past guides the future." Helena pulled out her notebook and began copying the inscriptions, aware that every detail could be critical. As she worked, a rustling noise behind her made her spin around. Emerging from the shadows was a tall man with graying hair and piercing eyes. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried a worn backpack. Helena took a step back, her breath caught in her throat. "I didn't mean to startle you," the man said calmly. "My name is Mateo. I'm an archaeologist." Helena regarded him with suspicion. "What are you doing here? This place has been abandoned for years." Mateo offered a faint smile. "I could ask you the same, but I think we're here for the same reason. That map you're holding. I've seen it before." Helena's stomach tightened. "How do you know about the map?" "I knew your father," Mateo replied, stepping closer to the altar. "Jose spoke to me about his research years ago. He believed this place held more than just ruins." Helena felt a mixture of relief and unease. "Why didn't he ever mention you?" "Because he knew there were risks," Mateo said. "This isn't just a cultural treasure. If the map is right, we're talking about something that could change everything we know about this region's history." Despite her reservations, Helena decided to accept Mateo's help. His expertise as an archaeologist could prove invaluable, especially as the map's clues grew more intricate. Together, they studied the inscriptions and determined that the next step would take them to a hidden cave in the nearby mountains. According to the map, the entrance was marked by a twisted tree that seemed to reach for the sky. The trek to the mountains was grueling. Helena and Matteo faced steep trails and unstable terrain. Along the way, Matteo shared stories of his work and how he had met Jose at a history conference. "Your father was a passionate man," he said at one point. "He never let the skepticism of others dim his pursuit of the truth." Matteo's words resonated with Helena. For the first time, she felt a deeper connection to her father's legacy. Though she still struggled to fully trust Matteo, something in her heart told her they were on the right path. By late afternoon, they reached a tree described on the map. It was an ancient, gnarled oak whose branches seemed to claw at the heavens. Beneath its roots, they found a narrow opening that led to the cave. Helena switched on her flashlight and looked at Matteo. "It's now or never," she said, trying to mask the nervousness in her voice. Matteo nodded. "Be ready. If the stories are true, this place holds secrets many have tried to bury." Cautiously, they entered the darkness. The cave walls were covered in carvings, some similar to the ones Helena had seen in the chapel. The air was thick and cold, as though time itself had stood still within these walls. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed from the depths. Helena and Matteo exchanged a tense glance. They knew they were about to uncover something that could change their lives forever. The cave seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Each step Helena and Matteo took echoed in the depths, amplified by the walls covered in ancient carvings. Helena felt a mix of awe and trepidation. She knew that what she was about to discover could redefine the history of Villa de los Almas, and perhaps her own family. "Be careful," Matteo said, switching on another flashlight to illuminate the path ahead. "These passages often have traps or unstable ground." Helena nodded, though her focus was drawn to the inscriptions on the walls. Some were similar to those she had seen in the chapel, but others were more intricate, almost as if they were telling a long-forgotten story. She pulled out her notebook and began copying some of the carvings while Matteo scanned the ground for signs of danger. After nearly an hour of navigating the narrow tunnels, they reached a larger chamber. The air grew colder, and a strange echo accompanied every sound they made. At the center of the chamber stood a dusty stone pedestal. Resting atop, it was an object that appeared to be a reliquary, adorned with intricate designs that hinted at its age and significance. Helena felt a chill run down her spine. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what my father was looking for." Matteo stepped closer to the pedestal, examining it carefully. "It seems intact, but we don't know what protections it might have." Ignoring Matteo's warning, Helena reached out to touch the reliquary. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, a mechanism activated. The sound of ancient gears filled the chamber, and part of the floor began to shift. Both of them jumped back, just in time to avoid a gaping pit that opened beneath the pedestal. "I told you to be careful," Matteo exclaimed, pulling Helena to safety. Helena breathed heavily, trying to steady herself. "I'm sorry, but this is bigger than I imagined. We can't stop now." Matteo sighed but couldn't hide his admiration for Helena's determination. "All right, but this time, let's be more cautious." The reliquary turned out to be another piece of the puzzle. Inside, they found a scroll encrypted with unfamiliar symbols and a small bronze key. Matteo studied the scroll while Helena examined the key. "This text seems to be a riddle," Matteo said. "It speaks of the tears of the mountain and the heart of the earth." Helena furrowed her brow. The tears of the mountain. It could mean a waterfall. "There's one near the valley on the other side of these mountains. My father mentioned it in his notes." Matteo nodded. "That makes sense. If the map and the scroll are connected, that might be our next destination." Exiting the cave proved to be just as tense as their exploration. Every sound seemed like a harbinger of danger, and the path felt narrower and more precarious. Eventually, they emerged into the open air as the sun began to set. Helena looked at Matteo, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety for what lay ahead. "We need to reach the waterfall before anyone else discovers this," she said, carefully tucking the scroll and key into her backpack. Matteo gazed toward the horizon, where the mountains loomed like dark sentinels. It won't be easy, but I think we're closer to the truth than we've ever been. That night, they camped in a clearing sheltered by tall trees. Helena stayed awake, poring over her father's notes and trying to piece together the clues. I always knew there was something special about his work, she said aloud. Matteo, sitting by the fire, looked up. Your father always said the past is the key to the future. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Helena nodded but couldn't shake a lingering doubt. She knew their journey was just beginning and that the challenges ahead would only grow more daunting. Still, there was an undeniable certainty in her heart. She couldn't give up. Not now. With the first light of dawn, they were ready to continue. The waterfall awaited, and with it, the answers they had been seeking. The sun had barely risen when Helena and Matteo resumed their journey toward the waterfall mentioned in the scroll. The mountain paths were narrow and winding, with loose stones crunching under their boots. Helena felt the tension in her muscles, but her determination remained unshaken. Each step brought her closer to the answers her father had sought for so long. How much farther is the valley? Matteo asked, wiping sweat from his brow. A couple of hours if we keep this pace, Helena replied. The waterfall is on the other side of the forest. My father always said you could hear its roar from a distance. The silence between them was occasionally broken by the chirping of birds or the crackle of branches underfoot. Although the surroundings seemed serene, both knew they had to remain vigilant. The thought that someone else might be chasing the same clues kept them on edge. When they finally emerged from the forest's edge, a distant sound of rushing water greeted them. Helena felt a spark of excitement. That must be the waterfall, she said, quickening her pace. Matteo followed closely, a mixture of caution and anticipation on his face. The landscape opened up before them, revealing a stunning waterfall cascading from a significant height into a clear, shimmering pool surrounded by lush vegetation. The air was damp, and the roar of the water filled their ears. It's beautiful, Helena murmured, captivated by the sight. Matteo nodded, but his attention shifted quickly to their surroundings. If the scroll is correct, we should look for a cave behind the waterfall. The words heart of the earth might refer to something hidden there. Carefully, they approached the waterfall's base. The ground was slippery, and the mist dampened their clothes with every step. Helena shivered as they found a narrow crevice hidden behind the curtain of water. It was barely visible among the rocks, but wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Here it is, Matteo said, pointing to the opening. It looks like someone's been here before. Helena frowned. Are you sure? Look at these marks on the rocks, he explained, indicating fresh scratches. They might have been made recently by someone entering or exiting. Helena swallowed hard, a mix of excitement and apprehension building in her chest. There's only one way to find out. They switched on their flashlights and entered the narrow passage. The walls were damp and close, and the sound of the waterfall grew muffled as they ventured deeper. Helena's heart raced as they descended into the darkness. The crevice widened into a larger chamber lit faintly by light filtering through small cracks in the rock. In the center stood a natural altar formed by stalagmites and stalactites, with a stone basin at its base. The water inside the basin seemed to glow faintly, casting an eerie light across the chamber. Helena stepped closer, transfixed. Could this be the tears of the mountain? Matteo studied the altar carefully. It's possible, but it could also be a trap. Let's be cautious. As Helena examined the basin, she noticed carvings similar to those in the chapel. She pulled out her notebook and began copying the symbols. They speak of sacrifice and reward, she said softly. It seems like we need to offer something. Matteo raised an eyebrow. What kind of offering? Helena pointed to an engraving of a key. I think it refers to this, she said, holding up the small bronze key they had found in the reliquary. Matteo nodded. That makes sense. But we should be ready for whatever happens next. With trembling hands, Helena placed a key in the center of the basin. Immediately, The water began to glow brighter, and a deep sound reverberated through the chamber. The light grew stronger, forcing them to shield their eyes. When the light faded, an opening in the chamber wall had been revealed. Helena and Matteo exchanged a look of amazement and determination. "It looks like we've found the next step," Helena said, stepping toward the new passage. Matteo followed, flashlight in hand. "This is getting more interesting than I expected." The passage led to a spiraling tunnel that descended further into the mountain. As they walked, Helena noticed that the walls were adorned with images depicting a story. Figures working together, overcoming challenges, and eventually achieving some form of enlightenment. "It's like a record of their journey," she said, running her fingers over one of the carvings. "Or a warning," Matteo added, pointing to an image of a figure falling into an abyss. The tunnel ended in another chamber, even larger than the last. At its center stood a stone structure resembling a portal, adorned with glowing symbols that Helena immediately recognized. "It's the star symbol," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The same one we saw in the chapel." Matteo approached the portal cautiously, inspecting its intricate carvings. This could be the final destination marked on the map. But before we step through, we need to be sure we're ready for what's on the other side. Helena nodded, feeling the weight of the journey pressing on her shoulders. She knew that whatever lay beyond this portal would not only change the history of Villa de las Almas, but also her own life forever. Helena's fingers brushed the carved edges of the portal as she felt the cold stone beneath her touch. A subtle vibration pulsed through the structure, as if the time locked within it was stirring to life. Matteo stood beside her, his flashlight casting fleeting shadows on the ancient symbols adorning the frame. "These inscriptions resemble the ones we saw on the scroll," Matteo observed. "But there's something more intricate here, something we haven't seen before." Helena leaned closer, studying the carvings. The symbols seemed to weave a story, a mixture of warnings and promises. At the center of the portal was a circular depression, perfectly shaped to fit the bronze key they had carried since the reliquary. "Do you think this key will work here too?" Helena asked, pulling it out cautiously. Matteo nodded. "It looks like everything has been leading us to this point. But once we activate it, there's no telling what will happen." Helena took a deep breath to steady herself. With a determined motion, she placed the key into the depression and turned it. A low hum echoed through the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. The portal began to glow faintly, and the air vibrated with an almost electric energy. Suddenly, a gust of wind erupted from the portal, extinguishing Matteo's flashlight. Helena instinctively stepped back, her heart pounding. Matteo grabbed her arm, his voice steady despite the tension. "Stay calm. I think this is just the beginning." As the glowing intensified, the portal transformed. A faint image began to take shape within its frame, revealing a landscape that looked otherworldly. It wasn't simply an opening to another chamber. It was a gateway to somewhere entirely different. "It's a passage," Matteo murmured, his voice tinged with awe. "But to where?" Helena felt a surge of courage. "There's only one way to find out." She stepped forward, crossing the threshold, and Matteo followed close behind. A brief vertigo seized them, as though the ground had momentarily disappeared. When they steadied themselves and opened their eyes, they found themselves in a misty valley surrounded by towering mountains that seemed to touch the heavens. The light was soft and diffused, casting an ethereal glow over everything. "This can't be real," Helena whispered, taking a tentative step forward. "It's like we've entered another world." Matteo scanned the surroundings, his caution undiminished. "It's real, but it's nothing like where we came from." The valley was dotted with ancient structures, some crumbling and others remarkably intact. In the distance, a massive tower rose above the mist, its surface covered with glowing inscriptions and surrounded by stone statues that seemed to guard it vigilantly. "That has to be our destination," Matteo said, pointing to the tower. "It's the center of this place." Helena nodded, but an unshakable feeling told her the path ahead would not be easy. As they approached, the statues lining the trail seemed almost alive, their stone eyes fixed on the intruders. Helena shivered, unsure if it was from the cold or the oppressive atmosphere. "These figures, they don't feel like decorations," she said softly. "They have a purpose." Mateo ran a hand along one statue's surface. Guardians, maybe, or warnings. As they neared the tower, the air grew heavier, carrying a sense of foreboding. Finally, they reached its entrance, a massive door carved with glowing symbols similar to those on the portal. At its center was another mechanism, a circular indentation like the one in the portal. "It looks like we'll need another key," Mateo said, inspecting the mechanism. Helena searched through her belongings but found nothing that fit. "Maybe the answer is in the carvings," she suggested, motioning to the intricate engravings on the door. Mateo began studying the symbols while Helena examined the area. Near the base of the door, she discovered a relief depicting a group of figures offering a radiant object to a source of light. "It's a sacrifice," Helena murmured, tracing the image with her fingers. "It seems we need more than a key." Mateo looked at her seriously. "What kind of sacrifice?" Helena closed her eyes, recalling her father's words. He always said the greatest sacrifice is knowledge. Maybe we have to give something personal." Mateo hesitated. "If that's true, we need to be sure about what we're doing. This place doesn't seem forgiving of mistakes." The door remained closed, and the weight of the decision pressed on them both. Helena and Mateo knew that whatever lay beyond the tower would not only reshape the history of Villa de las Almas, but also their own destinies. Bracing themselves, they prepared to make the ultimate offering and face the secrets hidden within the tower's walls. The door trembled as Helena placed her hand on the glowing symbol at its center. Mateo stood by her side, his eyes scanning the carvings for any hidden warnings. The air in the chamber was heavy, almost tangible, and Helena felt a deep resonance within her chest, as if the door itself recognized her. "This place isn't just a vault," Helena murmured. "It's a testament. My father always said this legacy wasn't about wealth. It was about identity." Mateo nodded, his expression serious. "But identities often come with a price. Are you ready to pay it?" Helena hesitated for a moment before reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small pendant, a simple piece of silver with a worn inscription. It had belonged to her father and was her last tangible connection to him. If it takes a sacrifice to uncover the truth, then so be it. With trembling hands, she placed the pendant in a hollow at the base of the door. As it settled, the symbols on the door began to glow brighter, spreading light across the chamber. A deep hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them seemed to vibrate. Slowly, the door began to open, revealing a brilliant golden light that spilled into the room. Helena and Mateo stepped into a vast hall unlike anything they had imagined. The walls sparkled with crystalline structures, and intricate carvings told the story of Villa de las Almas' origins. At the center of the hall stood a grand pedestal, atop which rested a disc-shaped artifact radiating a soft, pulsating light. "This is it," Helena whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "The legacy my father dedicated his life to finding." Mateo approached cautiously, his analytical mind racing. "This artifact, it's more than just a treasure. It's a record, a living archive of everything your village has stood for." Helena stepped closer, feeling an almost magnetic pull toward the artifact. When she touched it, a wave of visions engulfed her. She saw the struggles and triumphs of the village's founders, their sacrifices, and their dreams for future generations. She also felt their pain, the weight of their unfulfilled hopes, and their plea for someone to carry their story forward. "It's alive!" she gasped, her voice trembling. "It holds everything, every memory, every truth." Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The chamber's light flickered, and a low rumble echoed through the hall. "We need to move," Mateo shouted. "This place is collapsing." Helena clutched the artifact tightly against her chest. "I'm not leaving it behind," It's the heart of everything we've fought for. Dodging falling debris and navigating the trembling floor, they made their way back to the portal. The path was perilous, but they pushed forward, driven by sheer determination. Just as the chamber began to cave in entirely, they leapt through the portal, landing back in the misty valley. The valley was eerily quiet, as if it had been holding its breath. Helena looked down at the artifact in her hands, its glow now subdued but steady. Matteo placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it. This legacy is yours to protect and share." Helena nodded, a sense of clarity washing over her. "It's not just mine. It belongs to everyone in Villa de las Almas. It's their story, their strength." When they returned to the village, Helena gathered the community to share what she had found. She spoke of the artifact's meaning, the sacrifices of their ancestors, and the hope it symbolized for their future. The artifact became a beacon, inspiring the villagers to rebuild their community and preserve their heritage. Helena found redemption, not just for her father's work, but for herself. She had stepped out of his shadow and forged her own path, carrying forward the legacy of Villa de las Almas. Years later, Helena walked through a transformed village. Children played in the square, artisans showcased their crafts, and the once crumbling houses stood proud and vibrant. She paused by a newly built cultural center, where the artifact now rested as a centerpiece for all to see. As she looked toward the horizon, Helena felt a deep peace. The true treasure, she thought, was never gold or glory. It was the power of our story and the strength to keep it alive